I write everything with fountain pens. I don't know why. I've done it since I was bar mitzvahed. I was given a fountain pen, Parker fountain pen, and I loved it. And I've never liked writing anything with pencils or ballpoints. I just can't stand it. I love fountain pens have a very expressive line.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Joy with Fountain Pens. Today, I'm here with my friend Tyler Fallas, who is a musician and a writer, and we're going to talk about something a little differently than we do on this channel. We usually talk a lot about how pens write, and we review them, and we talk a lot about drawing, but today we're going to talk about what people use pens for most of the time, which is for writing words, and why particularly artists, writers use fountain pens at a time when most people write on computers. We started, in fact, with a quote from the great playwright Tony Kushner, who did Angels in America, and actually was a close friend of Maurice Sendak. And for people who don't know it, I'm the curator of the Maurice Sendak Foundation. Maurice Sendak was a great user of fountain pens to write letters and sometimes sign books and doodle with. He didn't use fountain pens to actually do his art so much, but he certainly used it to write with. And Kushner uses them since he was 13.
Since his bar mitzvah.
Since his bar mitzvah to write with, and he was interviewed when he did the screenplay for Lincoln, and talked about how he wrote with a fountain pen. It's funny, on Fresh Air they talk with him, and they said, "Well, did you do that because it's very 19th century to use a fountain pen?" And I, like many fountain pen users, we probably all were screaming at the radio because fountain pens really don't become something that people use until the 20th century.
You take great offense in that.
Yes. Let's put it this way. Abraham Lincoln did not use a fountain pen. He used the dip pen. And it's only in the 20th century, really, that fountain pens take off. They really sort of invented it, if you use the word invented, in the late 19th century. So I was going to say, though, that it's not in a certain way it's not a big deal to use a fountain pen in the beginning part of the 20th century, because then you were using the technology that everybody was using and was sort of state of the art for writing. I suppose you could use the typewriter, which also gets invented around that time. But, of course, I'm interested really in who uses a pen now, when fountain pens seem kind of old-fashioned. It is interesting that Mark Twain, in the beginning of the 20th century, promoted the brand of Conklin fountain pens. And actually, I have one of the pens that he promoted. This is a crescent, the Conklin crescent filler, which is very strange, but it's to us today. But
is that from the same time period as when he was doing it?
Yes. So it's the beginning of the 20th century, and you push down on this crescent shape, half moon shape, and that's the way that you would press on the sac that's inside the pen. And then when you turn this knob, that keeps you from pressing it. So that was the way that it would fill. That was the filler. And it's really interesting because Mark Twain really was, I believe, sort of credited with being the first celebrity to endorse any kind of product, sort of mass product. And the pen, this is a Conklin stopped being a company in the middle part of the 20th century, but then it was revived. The name was bought up, and I think around 2000, and then Conklin started making various pens, and they now actually have a series of pens which are dedicated to Mark Twain and still have this old-fashioned crescent filler system, and this is one of them. So this is a modern Mark Twain crescent filler pen.
That's nice.
Yes. But who are the people now really who use fountain pens? What are some of the writers that you were interested in?
We made a list. I guess contemporary. Apparently, George R. R. Martin, Stephen King use fountain pens. But also Salman Rushdie is a great lover of fountain pens, allegedly, and he has a pretty substantial collection of old fountain pens. But he was saying how he can't, in an interview, doesn't do the actual writing of like a story or something with the fountain pen, but for taking notes and stuff, he enjoys it. And he was mentioning how when he writes with a ballpoint pen, his handwriting is very bad, but when he writes with a fountain pen, I don't know if it's because he's more careful or he just enjoys the experience more, but, you know, his writing gets better.
I think for a lot of people, using a ballpoint pen, particularly something, you know, as crude as a Bic pen, you know, a cheap ballpoint pen, it takes actually quite a lot of pressure on your hand, and it hurts. It actually can hurt your hand, or at least for me, it kind of cramps my hand. And so that's one thing. But a fountain pen, because it has a certain life to the ink, and it also could depend on the kind of nib. If he has an italic nib, a stub nib, it's going to have thick and thin, and that can give your handwriting a kind of pizzazz to it. So that may be what he's talking about. Tony Kushner talks about how it gives him it's expressive, so that if he's angry or in a bad mood, his handwriting will be different because of the way the pen flows. It doesn't take much pressure, or almost no pressure at all, to write with a fountain pen, and that's something that I think a lot of people appreciates. Kushner also feels that the computer is kind of the kind of noise it makes, the sound it makes is distracting.
Well, he was saying for like writing his own plays, he writes with a fountain pen, but when he's writing a screenplay, he uses a computer or a typewriter. And I think he says something along the lines of, like, because a playwright owns the copyright for the play, when he uses the fountain pen, he has, like, this very personal, you know, like, thing that's his own. But when he's writing a screenplay, the screenwriter doesn't own the copyright to the screenplay. So maybe it's, like, the impersonality of that, you know. When he was writing Lincoln specifically, he took extensive notes, and like 9 notebooks worth of notes in fountain pen, or when he would get to a particularly challenging scene, he'd prefer to do it freehand with a fountain pen. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting that he's so involved with fountain pens that he often uses vintage pens and uses flexible nibs, because he likes the way that the nib is able to go thick and thin, and when he scratches something out, he can use, you know, really get into it. He said sometimes he even cuts through the paper when he wants to get something rid of. I mean, one of the things that is true about using a pen is that you cross things out, you make changes, and you retain the whole process in that way. I mean, the computer it often makes that disappear unless you turn on, you know, the function in editing that you know, keeps all the different changes. For the most part, you write over the mistakes. You take them out, and there's no history of that. While in handwriting, you have that wonderful sense of history.
Collection of the process.
Right. You know, it's something that I should do more, because in my journal, I always sort of hate it when I have to cross something out. And listening to Tony Kushner talk about that made me realize that that's silly in a way, that it's nice to sort of show that you've made a mistake or you changed your mind.
Yeah. Get to keep the receipts.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. One of my favorite writers is Ann Tyler, and I noted that she used to use fountain pens, but she talked about how, and I'm not quite sure what this is. I felt like maybe she was using the wrong fountain pen, but whatever pen she was using, she felt like she had to put like a Band-Aid on her finger or tape her fingers, because she would get, I guess, it would actually hurt her hand, and now she uses markers that don't do that. And I was thinking maybe she needs to use a better pen. Yeah. It's funny. So some of these writers use really expensive pens. Well, for example, Spike Lee has endorsed Mont Blanc. He did a whole series of film commercials.
Yeah, we watched
that are really kind of cool. And it's always a little bit unclear when a celebrity endorses something. What do they really use those pens, or are they are they getting them? And it's interesting in the films. He really does like a little history of his experience going back to when he was a child and writing. But it's not necessarily clear that when he was doing that he was
using a Mont Blanc.
Unlikely. Seems unlikely to me that a little kid would have super expensive pen to write with.
Fort Greene, summer of '77, exterior day. There's a man. He's 20 years young, but he sees the world through the lens of a Super 8 camera for the first time, and nothing's the same. This is a story of the storyteller from Brooklyn.
Other writers that I remember reading about Stephen King.
Stephen King,
yes.
H.P. Lovecraft, allegedly.
Well, he goes back before World War II, but
he's an older guy, but he was notorious for using one apparently. Like I saw a picture online of like a little Cthulhu drawing, and it had like clearly, fountain pen written words under it and some kind of green ink, and people were debating what kind of like ink it was, and he used from like 1920s, but he used a Waterman.
I think I actually have a pen probably similar to the pen that he used. Yes. So it could have been a Waterman 52. So because he said it was raven black.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is
gold,
raven black. This is a bit
on
brown.
The handle.
Yeah. So anyway, well, this is probably similar to a pen that he might have used. Sylvia Plath supposedly used Schaefer pens, and she may have used a Schaefer cartridge. I have probably, this is a lowly Schaefer, sometimes called a student pen, and this might have been the type of pen that she used that would take a cartridge. This is the kind of pen that actually Maurice Sendak often used when in the 1960s and 70s when he was writing letters. She also seemed to have used a Schaefer snorkel pen, which is kind of cool. That has let's see if I can get it to do that. It has a snorkel on it. Let's see if we can make it to work on the overhead phone. Let's see. Oh yeah, so she may have used a pen like this that has a snorkel on it. This is a Schaefer snorkel, and the idea of this was that you put this into the ink, and then you pumped the ink back into it, and then you pulled it back into the pen, and then hopefully you didn't get any ink on the side of the pen, so you wouldn't need a piece of paper to sort of clean it off. That's the theory, though. In practice, it's not necessarily so easy to do that.
It's like your tiny mouth in the Alien, from the Alien movie.
There you go. That's a beautiful, this particular one has a beautiful nib, doesn't it? Inlaid nib. Who else do we have on this
Emma
list?
Watson.
Yes, Harry Potter star.
There wasn't a lot of information about her. She was just had this interview with Marie Carey, I think it was. It was like a fashion kind of thing, and they asked her to like go through her purse. So it's pretty like unscripted, and she had like diary, glasses, everything. Then she had a Parker fountain pen, and she was like, "I love Parker fountain pens. It's the best pen ever."
Oh.
There wasn't a ton of information about like specifically what pen or if she's like uses it all the time and stuff. But she had it on her. So.
And then I noticed Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah Winfrey apparently has a huge collection of fountain pens. You can go online and see, she auctioned like a bunch off, and you can see kind of the whole lot. She was selling like 500 pieces or something, and you were mentioning how it's like, oh, maybe those were just like gifts to her and stuff, but it seems like she was an aficionado of them. Like multiple occasions she like gave out fountain pens as like those kind of like gifts under your seat to guests on her show. And
but it's not quite as good as getting a car.
Not quite as good as getting a car. No, that's true.
You're looking at your computer to see. Okay, and then wait, I'm looking at musicians. I always thought that was something that you would know about. Any musicians that use fountain pens? Oh
yeah, we saw Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance uses them. But I'm pretty sure he also makes graphic novels. Oh, a medium nib Pilot Metropolitan.
Oh, okay.
Filled with Fuyagaki Iro Shizuku red ink for corrections and notes.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, he was pretty detailed about it.
He's definitely
good.
sounds like somebody who's very
into
much
it.
into it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everybody knows about in the fountain pen world that Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Is that common knowledge?
Yes. Well, I'm not common knowledge, but it's known that he is
Aficionado
of the fountain pens.
He mentioned his first pen was an Osmeroid calligraphy pen.
Oh,
with a
okay.
piston-filled copper nib.
I have an Osmer. This is an Osmeroid, for a matter of fact. So that's interesting because Osmeroid makes a lot of drawing pens. This is a drawing pen, actually, for calligraphy. Does calligraphy. And that's a British company. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Cool.
With Hunt Extra Black ink.
And also Hunt ink is also very much... Hunt nibs were what Marie Sendak used. And Hunt ink would be, again, something that an artist would use drawing for. So that's interesting. Maybe that was something that he approached as perhaps he was interested in art at that time.
Maybe he showed in the video. He shows like his research notes, and they're pretty detailed and like very organized and neat. And like there was pictures of like.
But is there thick and thin lines that he writes?
Oh yeah. He was mentioning he only buys a fountain pen if the nib is like fun and flexible. That's like his like he needs to be a kind of like good and expressive nib.
Again, so he likes the thick and the thin, as Tony Kushner seems to like that as well. A lot of fountain pen people, that's what they care about, is they don't want a pen that just has a steel nib that only writes with one kind of line. So I was reading that Stephen King, when he was working on one of his novels, he uses Waterman pens that he wrote so many pages with it that he actually ran the nib down.
No,
right?
That's quite a bit.
That's a lot. And then Peter Straub, who also has collaborated with Stephen King, he's big on fountain pens, and he's no longer alive, he used really beautiful Visconti pens. And I noticed in one photograph of his fountain pens that he had several Visconti pens that were, or three at least, that were all the same. So obviously I think that's very typical of writers. Once they find something they really like, they're going to stick to it, and then they get worried that, they'll stop making it. So they buy a few of them because they really need that to write with.
I wonder if there are any characters in his books that use fountain pens.
Good point. This is just the beginning. I think, in general, I would say that it's one of my frustrations about the fountain pen world. I think we, as fountain pen people who love fountain pens, should spend more time thinking about not just, is this a good pen or not? Is it nice looking or feels nice in the hand? But also really what people are using it for. More of the history of writing, I think we need to be aware of. And so if you guys know of really interesting writers, sources for people who use the pens, it would be great to hear about that. Leave your comments and we'll follow up on it.
We'll do more research.